Architecture is often seen as the combination of opposing elements and concepts. It integrates at the same time polar opposites like inside and outside, past and future, simple and complex, abstract and concrete. So how can architecture reconcile between, say, the old and the new? Can it be modern while at the same time keep a sense of place? How can architects deal with technology in regard to their intuitive thinking? And how can they achieve coherence between the overall design concept and the details in a project? Hey friends, Miriam here. Welcome to another episode of Archibook Club, the series where I summarize the key insights from architecture books. This video is the promised second part discussion of Tadao Ando conversation with students, where we're going to talk about the key ideas, architecture purely related this time, that were brought up in the book. So let's start. Regionalism versus modernism. I think it's important to give robust definitions of these terms first, before discussing the points related to them in the book. First, modernism in architecture is a break with the past that had architects abandon past styles with their historical reference and decorated facades in favor of an architecture with purely functional concerns and simple geometric shapes. The technological advances that gave us steel frame and curtain walls at the time helped promote this approach. After the First World War, these tendencies became codified as the international style, especially through the book The International Style by both Henry Russell Hitchcock and Philip Johnson in 1932, where they formulated the following standards: architecture as volume, not mass; regularity in place of axial symmetry; expression from proportion and material itself rather than from applied decoration. There are different opinions of when modern architecture really began, and if you're interested in this topic, I'll leave a link in the description box to a really good video that discusses this point and whether it truly began with the founding of the Bauhaus school in the 1920s that is usually referenced to. Secondly, regionalism in architecture is about the traditional ways of making buildings in a particular region through techniques that take into consideration the climate, geology, geography, and topography of the region, and not to be confused with vernacular architecture that is often called architecture without architects, as it's made by local tradesmen and known for inherently following sustainable design principles through the passive systems for heating and cooling, for example. Now, concerning the book, Tadao Ando starts the regionalism chapter by referring to the state of homogenization that occurred in the world through the idea of modernism, which affected many fields, not just architecture, and how it led to the dissolvement of many local and regional cultures. He points out how in our days people seek both modernity and a sense of place, which are difficult to achieve at the same time, making the discussions on internationalism and regionalism necessary and requiring everyone's consideration and thinking, not just between architects, but also for everyone living in today's society. And at the end of the chapter, Ando mentions Dento Ronso, or the debate over tradition that occurred in Japan after the Second World War. There was this particular essay by the architect Kenzo Tange describing two approaches to tradition. In the first method, tradition is inherited on the basis of form, and in the second method, tradition is inherited through spirituality. And in relation to this point, Ando writes, Tange-sensei exemplified the former. His approach was to preserve and modernize traditional forms. I instead want to preserve and carry onward to future generations the spirituality flowing through the very core of tradition, not the concrete materiality of its form. Analogy versus technology. Ando warns students and readers of becoming bewitched by new technologies. For him, technology, just like modernism, tends to homogenize the world and dissolve regional distinctions and sensibility of place. He says that he wants to avoid the danger of suddenly losing sight of what's important while under the spell of technology, and believes that no matter how much digitization offers in terms of broadening our thinking, it can never diminish the importance of an analog way of thinking based on human intuition. It's not that he lacks interest in the new possibilities that technology and information processing have to offer, but he believes that architecture must rely on two approaches, of both the analog processing based on our intuition and the digital processing allowed by technology. To him, human intuition and its capacity for analogical thinking is different from what technology offers us, and he speaks of intuition and inspiration as transcendental powers necessary to the imagination of architects. Here's a really nice argument from the author himself on this point. I'll read you from the book. Architectural design requires one to simultaneously consider and digest an endless variety of matters in order to make decisions based on a number of relationships. What transcends these concerns is intuition. Always use your five senses and take leaps of faith. It is within the logically undescribable or clearly unrecognizable that the unlimited potential of analog thinking resides. Partiality versus totality. One of the fundamental concerns in architectural design is this conflict between the part and the whole, or an all-embracing concept versus the expression of detail. Ando says that he is often seen as extremely obstinate when it comes to details, but for him those details aren't superficial. They express the very basis of the design concept. And at the same time, for him, creating architecture simply by accumulating parts is both difficult and problematic. Instead, there should be a thoughtful process to achieve consistency of concept through the architectural work. The chapter titled Partiality and Totality in Architecture is an analysis of Carlos Scarpa's work, which is distinguished by the architect's talent to create coherence from individual elements, which is unique, considering that the modern approach in architecture is based on this ideology in which the whole is united and the parts are divided, which can be compared, as I understood it, to a jigsaw puzzle-like effect, where the individual pieces, when separated, almost have no meaning, and it's only when they're assembled, each one at its place, in the portion of the picture, that we start to see the complete image. That is to say, in a modern approach, we begin by the master plan, or plan de masse, that gives an overview of the building and its implementation in the site. Apparently, Carlos Scarpa's architecture takes us back to the process of beginning from the part, which was abandoned by modernists' search for rationality and industrialized items in windows, doors, and structural elements. Scarpa worked from within the realm of the senses. He started from the parts to arrive at form, which is a risky methodology as it can lead to disorder, or what Ando calls disjointedness. But to him, Scarpa's approach is so well thought out through his own senses of sight and touch that each creation is realized as a unified work of art. I've personally never visited any of Scarpa's work, but after reading this book, it's definitely on my list now, and so this chapter on this particular dichotomy of both partiality and totality is a nice introduction to his work, known for his attention to details. So yeah, finally, architecture can indeed combine the old and the new through keeping the essence of tradition and translating that in new forms allowed by the technological advancements of the specific time or era. For the analog processing versus the digital processing, I think that's a debate that has gotten even bigger since the lectures that this book is based on were given. The general AI and how it's going to take over all the jobs and so on. And if you're interested in this topic, you might want to check this video from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast featuring Naval Ravikant, where they talk about this particular topic. I'll leave the link in the description box. For the third point, I think Ando's approach makes sense. Details should reflect the concept, and Scarpa's craftsmanship approach to architecture is something that is really rare in our current world. The book was truly a wonderful read, a lot of lessons in there. I highly recommend it. I'm a big fan of Ando, by the way. He was one of the first architects I got to study their work as part of an assignment we had in first year of architecture school, where we had to present a star architect and study one of their projects. And I remember making the model of the Cuscino house and drawing its plans and perspectives. From there I became a big admirer of his work. I've had the chance to visit one of his buildings. That happens to be his first building outside Japan, which is the Vitra Conference Pavilion in Weilheim, Germany. I fortunately wasn't disappointed, and that visit endorsed what I often read about Ando's architecture. As I said, there is a first part to the book analysis on life advice based on the architect's journey that can be of interest to everyone, not just architects. So yeah, that's about it. If you like this video, you know what to do, and thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.